Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Haider Shah. On behalf of Kalwas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we have another very interesting topic, and I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker, who is going to talk about how to publish in high impact journals. In this session, we will discuss into the essential strategies and tips that can significantly increase your chances of successfully publishing your work in prestigious journals with the high impact factors. Whether you are an early career researcher seeking guidance or an experienced academic looking to enhance your publication record, this webinar will provide you with the valuable insights, best practices, and practical steps to navigate the complex world of scholarly publishing. So you will get the best insight about all these things because we have an expert with us in today's this session. So before we start, I would like to thank Kalwas for arranging such enlightenment sessions for their support and providing us such a wonderful platform. The aim of Kalwas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world-renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to learn from their experiences, recommendation, and suggestion, which will create an impact and will enable you to learn and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually, as well as to contribute to the world in a positive way. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So today we have an amazing person as guest. He is a versatile person with an amazing great qualities, having vast experience and exposure. Internationally known and recognized speaker, we always see him on different platforms while contributing to the field and world. Let me introduce him formally. He is a academic director, the third degree, adjunct professor, Taylor's University, Malaysia, adjunct lecturer, USCI, University Sarawak. He is a multidisciplinary in his outlook. His undergraduate degree being in the socioeconomic geography, a master's in economic development, and doctoral work in economics and globalization. In addition to that, he holds additional postgraduate qualification in territory teaching and learning and has keen interest in educational management and facilitation development. Moreover, he has lectured in several countries, taught for British and Australian branch campus universities in Southeast Asia, as well as supervised research student for universities in New Zealand, Malaysia, India, Indonesia, and Cambodia. In addition to that, he is currently teaching educational leadership program and postgraduate research methodology courses, in addition to coaching doctoral candidates with their methodology design. Last but not the least, he is a wonderful speaker, author, teacher, researcher, professional, and above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming our guest, Professor Dr. Craig Selby. Welcome to the Calvas platform, and thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate the invitation and lovely to meet everyone here tonight. So good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are nearly at midnight in Malaysia. I'm a night person, so no problem. It is a pleasure to be here
Thank you
and
so
to
much.
share with you tonight
Thank you
about.
so much. And we are looking forward for a wonderful content you are going to share with us. You are looking full of energy. And audience, a soft reminder to the audience that Prof will be presenting and he will leave time for question answer session at the end of the session. So thank you and over to you, Prof.
Great, thank you very much. So, tonight I'm going to share ideas on how to publish in journals. And we've called it high impact journals, but the same advice applies to any type of journal publication that you want to do. I'm going to touch upon some of the simplistic stuff, which is really the planning, the writing, and then I'm going to touch upon some of the more complicated things that we need to consider, the issues that we need to consider as we are choosing uh, how to develop our manuscript for submission to a journal. So, mostly about me has been covered. I think the only important thing there is my LinkedIn. You are welcome to connect with me. Please do. I'm always happy to address questions or to share ideas, or like tonight, to give guest lectures as well. My email address is there as well, craig at the third degree.asia, but LinkedIn is certainly much easier. For tonight, I have 5 objectives, and I'm going to cover these in order pretty much as we progress through the session. Now, I will apologize in advance. Many of you will expect a very tidy 1 hour session. I talk a lot, and chances are I will go over time. But we'll try and keep within that. My objectives for this session are quite easy. I want to explore key considerations in our publication journey and our development of a publication strategy, because it's not about getting one journal article published. It's about having a long-term career goal and research plan so that not only do we have 1 or 2 things out there, we know what is coming up next. We know where we are heading with our publications, and we can leverage between the publications that we do very early in our career and leverage it towards the publications we continue to do, whether or not they are from the same data set or something different. But there is, or there has to be, a strategy associated with that. I want to explore tools for curating our publication strategy. And I'm going to introduce you to a publication design canvas, which is a very simple graphic tool that we can sit down, print out, sit down, play with, and we can start designing our sets of publications and how we want to work it through. And I find these tools very helpful because it gives us a snapshot, like a photograph. It gives us this snapshot of what we want to do with our publication. And it helps us also align that with our bigger picture, our goals. It helps us align it with the journal that we want to work with as well. So that kind of mixes in with the third one, and I apologize, I feel like I've overlapped here. Tools for planning individual research projects and articles. So I'm going to bring those two together. I'm going to give some practical advice on structuring and writing the manuscript as well. And finally, some techniques for refining our writing style, but also engaging with SEO techniques, search engine optimization. I'm not an SEO expert, but the advice I give is easy to follow and it works. And that's all that's important. But I also want to touch upon a few other issues that we must consider as authors as we are submitting, but also as we are looking at our broader pattern, our objectives for, say, the next 3 to 5 years, our publication strategy. I want to touch upon some of the issues that we have to think about there. I'm going to start very basically with publication considerations. And the first thing is choosing what to publish. Now, I spend most of my time working with PhD candidates and early career academics. So I have a bit of a bias because I will often talk about publishing as part of the PhD process. So that's where I am here, but also we can go a bit beyond that. So when we choose what we want to write about, I look at it, and if you see at the bottom of the slide, strategic planning. Everything is about having a personal academic strategy as to where we're going. It's not randomly we wake up, I can publish an article, let me just jump something together and see what happens. That happens, by the way, but that's not the long-term thinking we need. So my first question that I want to ask, and you have to ask this to yourself, is it from your PhD journey? It doesn't mean it has to be from your dissertation or whatever you have developed of your dissertation right now. It simply is what you want to publish part of the PhD journey. And if it is, how do we go from something that's roughly 100,000 words, maybe more, maybe less, down to 6,000 words? And given that the average Journal article is somewhere between 5,000 to 8,000 words, including references. That's a lot to shrink down. So we have to think about, what do we want to get out of it? Which is my third question. How many papers can we get out of our PhD dissertation? One quality PhD dissertation should easily give us 5 independent publications that we can put through different journals. So it's important for us to think, look, if it's part of that journey, what am I going to take? I'm not going to summarize my PhD because you can't, not in 6,000 words. So I've got to say, what are the key factors out of my whole dissertation that I can bring down? Now, what if it's external to our PhD? I did my PhD a long time ago. I don't want to remember when. And different things come along. But even when I was doing my doctorate, I had a couple of other interests and I was exploring other themes as well. And that is perfectly fine. No matter where we are, having that strategy doesn't mean we have one topic. It doesn't mean we have only one focal point. It means we have some core focal point, and then we might have a couple of other topics that interest us that have a loose connection, or that might be somewhat a bit more distant from where we are. And that's perfectly acceptable because, again, it's a strategy of where you want to be with your publication journey and how that translates into your career. Now, the last question I asked there is, does your publication now impact your PhD in any way? And I ask this because for early career academics, for those who are still in the PhD journey, if I publish something now before I publish my PhD, is there going to be a conflict? Is there going to be an issue in terms of the further development? So it doesn't really matter what the answer to my questions are. All I want is, as you answer them for yourselves, you understand where you are at, and you can think about what does that mean for down the future. It also means, as we're asking it, what's my next publication going to be? If, for example, I'm extracting a publication based on methodological development, I've changed or created a new approach to methodology. This can apply to my PhD. This can apply to many other researchers into the future as well. What's next? Because I can't get 10 articles about methodology, not unless you're, one of our extremely famous global people like Cresswell or someone like that. We're not going to have that. So what we've got to think about is, look, am I getting a methodology paper? Am I able to get 2 papers out of my data set? And maybe my data set has given me a whole lot of interesting findings. Can I take one of those findings and get an independent paper? Can I then take another finding and get a completely different paper from it and to progress? So it is about having that strategy in there. The next thing that we have to consider is, beyond our topic, beyond what we want to have as content, as research to share, is what journal are we going to use? And this is where advice is going to differ. Our friend here, Dr. Haider, and I will probably give you different advice. And that's also acceptable because we're all different. What we have to think about is what journal works for you at this period of time. Not all of us are going to get in top ranking Scopus journals. Some of us will settle for a local journal that's a good first start for us. And I personally encourage that. But at the same time, I also encourage that your next publication is in a better ranked journal. No, we climb that ladder. We don't aim for the top today, but we aim for reaching the top and staying in the top as we continue with our career. So I'm always of the belief that publish first, ask about ranking second, but universities are not. Universities will say best ranking journals possible, and you have to filter that into your decision. So maybe we choose the set of journals that we like or that we want to consider approaching based on their rankings. I think we have to do it in alignment with our own research. And what I mean by that is, look, where does our research fit into what the journal is doing existing? So, for example, as an economist, I'm not very likely to be, doing any research in Journal of Underwater Sports, for example, because the alignment is not there. But if the Journal of Underwater Sports is moving forward to looking at the economic processes of the sports industry, then there might be something that aligns with me. So that's the third point there, sorry, is when your research aligns with the journal objectives. So one of the things that you need to do is look at your journals, think about their rankings, see how you fit into the existing. But that's today. What about tomorrow? Where is the journal heading? Because it's going to take 6 months to a year for you to develop your paper, submit your paper, respond to all of the key feedback that's coming, and finally get it published. So understanding where the journal wishes to be actually will help us choose. We need to think about whether we are having, or the journal, sorry, think about whether the journal is having special editions. And is there a special edition of the journal that aligns well for us? Maybe it's not how they normally approach their quarterly or their half yearly publication, but maybe bringing together experts on a particular topic. And if you happen to be an emerging expert or an expert in that particular topic, can you get in on that special edition? Something I also think is very important when choosing a journal is understanding any interdisciplinary research possibilities. I come from an interdisciplinary, uh, well, I just want to say an interdisciplinary discipline. As my early training was in geography, human geographers are essentially economists and sociologists and anthropologists rolled into one with a few other things that come by it. I moved across to economics, but I still appreciated the spatial nature of everything. And that interdisciplinarity meant I don't have to publish in geography or economics journals. At the fringes, at the boundaries of where our disciplines are, there are connections with other disciplines. There are connections with education, there are connections with psychology, there are so many different connections, architecture, social work, all sorts of things. And when we look at choosing the journal for our publication, this is not so much about, oh, I'm an economist, let me publish in a mainstream economics journal. It's also about which interdisciplinary journals can we move towards that we can share our research with, but also get the responses that we want. Now, that brings me into the next point, which is location and exposure. Not all of us live in the UK or live in the United States where the big journals are. And not all of us are going to get access to them straight away. Look at where the journal is going to be of interest to the readers, where your possible collaborations with the journal or with other authors within that journal community is going to help you. And also, at the end of the day, if you have a publication that's geographically set, that your geography of that relates to those who are reading it. You don't want to publish an article about the American economy in the Journal of Southeast Asian Economic Studies, for example. The geographies are different, and vice versa. So have a think about that. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule, but look at that. The next part of that is exposure. So not only where it is and whether that's right for you, but will the people that you want to cite your research actually see your research in this publication? So that's, again, that comes back a little bit to rankings in one way, but it is also about academic survival and sustainability. And the last part I have in choosing the journal is career path intentions. Where do you want to head? Where do you see yourself? Not, my advice is always look, anywhere you can publish, go for it, but make tomorrow's publication better than today's. But the career path intention is some people will say, look, publishing in a very low ranked journal may be detrimental to your career. And they are not wrong. But if this is your first publication, just go for it. If it is your 12th publication, don't go down, go up. That's the key thing that we have to consider. Now, there are a lot of different types of journal articles, and I'm just going to go really briefly through this. Sometimes the easiest way to get published is to write a book review. And I know it sounds silly, but we don't always have to write a pure research-based journal article to get published. Sometimes part of our strategy has to be to look at other approaches to get in there. And maybe if we're struggling with our PhD, for example, and we're looking at what can I get out of it, sometimes it's okay if you just look at a literature review or a methodology note or data notes. So there are these different things that we can put within journal articles that are accepted for publication. Now, yes, that affects rankings. It changes, in a way, your citations. But for someone like me who doesn't chase that so much, I still want to get my contribution out there. And I believe that as academics, we have to not only contribute to the development of research, but to all the other aspects of that as well. So I've put number 11 down there, and there is a story behind this, obituaries. Sometimes that's something that we might have to write. And all of this simply comes down to showcasing yourself as a research communicator in different ways. And if I don't have enough solid information to make a great article today, what can I do with what I've got? I want to move on from that and talk about the article design canvas, because at the end of the day, it does not matter what you write about. If the research is there, the research is ethical, you are robust in your writing, you are robust in your planning, then you can submit it, and after some time, you can get it published. So I want to go back to the beginning of all of this, which is the article design canvas. And it's a very simple graphic. Now, I know it's going to be very hard to read on the screen here, and I appreciate that. What you can do is go to a website. Let me just check. academic-toolkit.com. It is an Australian website run by Dr. Ben Alloway, I think, Alloway, if I'm not mistaken. And he has taken very standard business tools, which was actually the business development canvas, which is a tool used in entrepreneurship and business planning. And he decided, you know what, we can take this tool and we can adjust it for academic research. And I find this article design canvas excellent to be able to process with. Now, it holds its purpose for a lot of reasons. Whether you are a PhD candidate or an emerging academic or someone who's been around the block a couple of decades like me, this particular canvas just gives you this simple, easy way to think things through and to start planning out what you're going to do. It gives you the focus. It allows you to help align with the journal and see which journals you want to be able to effectively write this publication for. But it helps you plan out not only the structure, but the key messages as well. And I think even for someone who's been in academia for 30 years, I will still use this as a tool for myself, even though I know what I'm doing some days. Even though I know what I'm doing, I'm going to use this as a tool because it helps me think through and get clarity of message, clarity of focus for what I want to do. And then it enables me to progress and to write and to actually develop and flesh out what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not going to talk about the inner workings of this article design canvas. That's a couple of hours on its own. But what I encourage you to do is, use Dr. Google, search for article design canvas, Ben Alloway, academic toolkit, whatever the keywords that are out of there that you sort of jot down, and get a copy of this for yourself. There are different sites online that will also share with you how you can use the article design canvas. So if you're sort of looking, thinking, Craig, please explain it more, there's plenty of opportunity online for that as well. But it's certainly a very good tool. I want to move into writing your article. And I'm sort of going to give some very, I guess, common sense advice at this moment in terms of what to do for writing. And you might think this is quite simplistic, and it is. But whether you are writing for a top tier Scopus ranked journal, or you're writing for a journal at your university, which probably doesn't get read by people outside of your university, the writing's the same. And that's what the message I want to focus on. I personally believe our writing is driven by our research and our findings, not by our ability to write. That's a whole different thing. If we have interesting research, we can get it out there, we can tidy it up, we can get it published. It's got to be interesting research to start with. So I start with the idea of synthesis by title, and I'm probably one of the odd academics who writes the title before I write anything else. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I don't have a title for it, I can't develop it. So I take this top-down approach where the title starts, everything else falls into place, and then later I change the title. But that's my own set of processes. Now, it will be different for each of us, but I feel that having a working title helps. Now, to me, it helps me keep on focus. But come back to choosing the journal. We chose a particular journal that we want to submit to. In terms of choosing that journal, we've also understood what is their style. What are their expectations? What are the types of articles that they publish? And for us, that's our guideline. Reading, several volumes of their output over the last few years, to give us a sense of how do we or how do our research fit into this is actually valuable. Now, having that title means we keep on focus because that title aligns to what we have within the journal itself. So I feel it's very, very important. It really helps because, as per the sentence up here, look, a title needs to be written to reflect an academic context and an audience, and that will keep us focused in writing for that audience. We move into the abstract, 200 to 300 words, give or take. And what I like here is Brown in 1994, and I use this a lot in my teaching, but I think it's very, very helpful. Brown in 1994 deconstructed typical abstracts and says, there's a way to do it. And it simply becomes 8 questions that helps us to frame a simple abstract. Now, again, I will write an abstract before I write everything else. I have friends and colleagues over the years who look at me and say, how do you do that? And I usually say it's because I know what I want first, or I know the answers. It's actually not the truth. I simply do it because I need the guideline, I need the motivation. And the abstract helps to give me that so that I can think through everything else. And as I write, as I continue to write remainder of what is being published, I will come back and I will change my abstract because I'll realize I made some mistakes or I limited it too much. But having that little summary to start with is fantastic motivation. And it also helps me if I forget to put something in that, does this align back with my abstract? Did I miss something? But the key point of this slide is not about whether you do your abstract first or last, because that's not so important. It's about what goes into it. So Brown suggested, look, there are 8 questions for an academic to answer in order to write an abstract. And the first one's very simple. Who are the intended readers? List 3 to 5 of them by name. Now, I'm setting myself up for an academic joke here because, for most of us, we do a PhD dissertation and probably 5 people in the world read it. One of them will probably be our parents. So at the end of the day, we're not getting a lot of people, right? But it is good to know, who do you want your audience to be? So when I write something, I already know who I want. And sometimes it's a very specific purpose. It's not about it being, family business specialists in Southeast Asia. It's not about that. It's, I want Henry Jung at NUS to read this article because I want a particular person to cite it, or I want their response to it. I want their interaction with what I'm doing. So when he suggests, look, who are your intended readers? We know that we want people who are interested in a couple of very core themes, but we should also write with a couple of specific individuals in mind as well, because then we've got to make sure we understand what type of questions they will ask. Are we addressing that with what we're doing? Now, we simply have 8 questions, I believe, or it might be 7, 7 questions left. What did you do? 50 words, simple. Why did you do it? Another 50 words. What happened when you did that? Another 50 words. What do the results mean in theory? So not how it's going to be applied, but is this something that you've made a contribution to a broader understanding? What do the results mean in practice? So how will we, as academics, how will we as practitioners out in the field apply what we've got? What is the key benefit for readers? And what remains unresolved? Now, again, this is a preliminary abstract. I'm not going to do that and never edit it. I'm going to change things around. I'm going to update it. But by answering that, you're giving a good overview as to your research, which means you've now got a working title, a working abstract, and you can go and produce the manuscript that goes with that. We develop an outline, and this is why I use the article design canvas, because the article design canvas gives us by default an outline. Now, if we're doing a typical research-based journal article, it's always going to have the same sort of uh, structure to it. The quantum or the amount of content that goes into it will, of course, be different. And that's okay, but you're still going to address much the same type of questions. Now, I'm someone who likes to write books and book chapters. I personally find that more rewarding, but I'm not chasing citations and I'm not chasing a career development. Um, what I do within book chapters and within books is very different to this. So as you work amongst the different formats of how you might choose to publish, you've got to recognize that there will be different structures for you to use. So again, going back to the article design canvas gives us an opportunity to build a structure that has meaning and value and will make your life easier. And I think that's the goal. We already know the research. We're already confident in our results and in our interpretation. Now, what we've got to do is simply communicate that in writing to those 5 other people who we hope will enjoy it. Now, the advantage of using the 8 questions, and let me just go back to that for a moment. I mean, these questions not only tell us or give us a guideline for an abstract, they actually help us in developing the outline of where we're going. And the advantage of using this is the answers actually develop the outline for your paper. And then you can start fleshing that out, making that more substantial. So some of the pieces of advice, it's taking the keywords in each sentence of your abstract and using that as a fundamental basis to expand upon. Maybe we write them into section headings. We might use them in the topic sentence throughout the section. Now that's a key thing. When we're writing, repetition of concepts, repetition of writing structures actually has benefit for our readers, but to keep us on track as well. So as we look at things from the abstract point of view and we take it and we repeat it, we know that we've got a substantial body of discussion point to evolve from that. And it's a mental technique. It helps us to process, to think, to be able to write. And, the final part here is look, define and explain the terms as needed. We're simply developing an outline. We're not developing 100% content, but we're developing a structure that covers what we need to get us started with. Now, again, when we build a house, and I'm going to have to use a wooden house as an example, but when we build a wooden house, we develop the frame first. We put the we put the flooring down, we build the scaffolding, we build the wall, we put the roof on the house. And then we start filling it in. Walls, ceiling tiles, all of that sort of stuff. The same works for us when we write. We develop that outline. We make sure that the key messages are there first. And this is what's important. Nobody, 99.9% of us, will not sit down at a laptop, type, and write something that's perfect. It's not going to happen. The few people that it does happen for, congratulations. The rest of us are jealous. For most of us, we simply need to be able to get the direction, start the journey, come back, look at things. So don't expect to write something perfect. Don't expect to be able to sit and write it beginning to end. But do know that if you create that outline, you can look at that outline and you can say, does that align to the journal? Is that what the journal likes? Is that what the journal publishes? And then we can also say, have I covered everything? Have I gone too far? Because especially if I'm taking something from my PhD dissertation, you know, that 100,000 words down to 6,000 words is hard. Have I included more information than I needed? And can I take something out? Or can I split it? Two publications, even better, because, we're about keeping that focus. We're about having that different purpose. So we want to keep that focus as we can. So the outline will really help us not only get where we're going, but maintain the focus, not put too much into something, so that we can get a really credible publication that's very refined, that's very focused on select elements that you want to discuss, knowing that you can do with others a little bit further on. Now, writing the article becomes quite simple then, or at least in my mind, it becomes simple. And it's really just filling in those gaps. So obviously the introduction, the rationale, the aims and objectives, the study area, previous work, everything we'd put in, but it's not as um, voluminous, it's not as wordy as you would. You can't take a chapter out of your PhD and say, let me write an article. You can take that chapter and you can say, let me find the best points and let me massage that into an article. We do need to talk about methodology. Now, here's where I usually get a little bit upset, because I'm a person who's interested in methodology, and that's where I teach. Almost most of what I teach is in methodology. I always love reading innovations in methodology. I love to understand how people do it. At the end of the day, you probably only need 2 paragraphs. Now, that kind of isn't exciting for me. But remember, our audience, you're not defending your choice of methodology that you would in a PhD. What you're simply doing is saying, this is the methodology I've used, this is why, this is any addition I've made, and you're moving on. So the methodology section becomes a sort of, oh, done. And it's this very short, usually, this very short contribution. We focus on the results, we focus on the discussion. Now, let me just sort of read the couple of sentences that I put in there so I can give a little bit more focus and idea for everyone. So the results, we present the results of our work. Large data sets may also be published as supplementary data. They should include some clear figures and diagrams at this stage. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. The results are interesting because people want to see that. The fact that we can publish data sets these days has some implications for us. As an academic who believes in sharing, I also believe that publishing data sets can be valuable for future researchers. As a historical researcher myself who loves other people's data sets, I'm always very appreciative of what can be there and whether or not that can be used in any format within my own research or within my own writing. But I think it's important to think about that. When we talk about clear figures and diagrams, what I would like to always challenge someone to do, can you take your proposed article and draw it up as a set of 3 to 4 diagrams? If you can draw it up as a set of diagrams, which means I can have it explained visually rather than textually, you've got a really good thing. Now, if you can draw it up like that, that diagram should go into the publication itself, but take your time with it. As I move into the discussion section, it's really placing your results in the broader context of where you are. So the implications of the work, how it relates to others, What does that mean? Maybe you've identified more questions than you have answers. And I often say to people that's actually a very valid part of the research process. We believe we're there to find answers. Mm, that would be nice, but we are also there to ask more questions. And sometimes those questions get answered, sorry. Sometimes those questions get answered by somebody else. But it also is about how have we moved the discipline on? Our research, our findings, our understanding of those findings. What did we do for our discipline? How did we move that forward? Now, that part in the discussion, I think, has value for us. And we should always be reflecting. I think as academics, regardless where we are in our career, if you're older and jaded like me versus somebody who's young and enthusiastic and ready, we still have to ask, what is our impact? And to be able to highlight the value of the contribution, not I made it this good, woohoo. It's not that type of sharing, but it's have you made an economic impact? Is this going to financially benefit people? Is it going to save them money? Have we made a social impact? Have we changed processes that enable something to happen in a better way? Or are we just doing an academic impact? An academic impact is I wrote an article because I could, nobody benefits from it other than me. And it's reality. We can do all three, we can do two of the three, or we can do one of the three. But it's good to acknowledge and it's good to understand for ourselves where that's going to be. Now, I always feel that should go into an article, because if we are able to streamline processes, if we're able to help populations or communities save resources or use resources more effectively or more efficiently, then that's of value as well. If we've simply been able to disprove something that we've thought from the past, or move the discussion along, or change the methodology we use, fantastic, because that's what our future generations are going to reflect on. So back to this, sort of as I digress a bit, but back to this, results and discussion are very important. Conclusions are very simple. Now, I think the key point here is you may want to use bullet points. That doesn't mean when you submit the article to the journal, I see bullet points, because, that's going to get some form of nasty comment from R2, or maybe a rejection. But as you write it, use those bullet points to guide you. Now, there's also simple things like acknowledgements. I put this in here not because I think it's a big deal, but I always believe that as academics, we don't exist in a silo. Many people say you do exist in a silo, and you sit in your office, you do your work, but we interact with so many people. We interact with our colleagues that are in our own departments. We interact with other academics from around the world. And I do that quite regularly for a lot of purposes. Those people contributed to my article. You might not, they may not have sat down with you and helped you write a page or two, but discussions with them, discussions with some of them helped contribute. And I think a very important element of developing as an academic is to acknowledge when you've had interactions with other academics that have helped you think through the problems you have at hand. So although this is probably the least important section in an article, I think it is also the most humbling section in the article, where you can actually reflect on the fact that, everything we do as academics is a collaborative effort. It's not just ourselves. So mentioning those discussions, very briefly, of course, but acknowledging that somebody shared an idea that helped you move forward, I think is very important. The final one being references, very easy. Let me move forward into some more practical advice, because that's what we're here for anyway. Now, this is an overview of 12 tips, and I sort of want to rush through this because the next slide is better. Plan early, get it out the door. I'm a terribly slow writer. I have a book manuscript to submit in 10 days' time, and I'm 7 chapters into 24. I've only had it sitting on my desk for a year and a half. So I'm a little bit slow. So plan early, get it out the door, don't procrastinate. Always address authorship and writing expectations up front, especially if you've got two or more collaborators you're working with. Maintain control, ensure complete reporting, very important ethics side of things. It is about being very transparent with what you do. Using electronic referencing management software simply because one, it makes it easier for you, it makes it easier for the journal, and you can also adjust the style because you have to format everything to the journal style, not to what you like. And every time you write a publication, you're going to be finding that you have to adjust how references are presented. Polish carefully before you submit. Now, that's a very important thing. Many of us here may not be writing for publication in our first language, and that's increasingly common these days. I always feel, you know, the research will speak for itself, but you need to get it proofread, you need to get it edited, you need to work with somebody for that. And I very strongly advocate, look, I don't have a problem most of the time with your research. The issue might be with how the words are structured. And it's always good to work with somebody who can spend a bit of time sitting down with you, even if that's over Zoom, but someone who can sit down with you, read your manuscript, ask you questions about it, and just help you refine it so that it looks as clear and precise as it could. Now, I did some proofreading for a academic who works in Scotland a couple of months ago. And I'm friends with the journal editor. He asked me, look, could you take care of this for her? The research was fantastic, but her sentence structure was just a little bit different. So every sentence started the same way. And when I looked at it, I'm like, your ideas are great. Can I just change every beginning of the sentence? And that's all I did. I changed the beginning of every sentence. I moved some commas. I sent it back to her. It's now being published. So spending a little bit of time with somebody to understand actually is very helpful in that respect. Leading to number 7, selecting the right journal. If you screw that up, the whole process is horrible. So invest your time in making sure that the journal suits where your research is going and that you're suited to that journal. Follow journal instructions precisely. This is about their house style. This is about their special requests. The easier you make the job for the editor, the easier the editor can give an acceptance versus come back with questions or problems. Get it back out the door quickly. So if you're given feedback, don't sit on that feedback. And there's a good piece of advice that my colleague, Mike Mustafa from Nottingham University, gave me a couple of months ago when he and I had a similar conversation to what we're doing tonight. He's like, when you get feedback from reviewers or an editor, sit on it for a couple of days. The first thing to do is celebrate that you got feedback and they didn't say it's a rejection. So celebrate the fact that you got. Sit on it for a couple of days. Don't have that knee-jerk reaction. I must solve it. I must change everything now. Sit, let it reflect, then come back 2 days later. Within that 1 week, 7 days, 10 days period, that's where you want to say, okay, these are what I can address. This is how I'm addressing it. Resubmit. Don't wait too long, but don't do it immediately. You need to have that time to think it through. So take seriously all reviewer and editor suggestions. At the end of the day, though, when a reviewer gives you a comment, it's their perspective, their interpretation. You do not have to agree with the reviewer. I think that's a very important consideration to have. Too many emerging academics feel that reviewer must be followed 100%. No, it's your research. If the reviewer suggests something that you're not comfortable with, counter it. Come back with a logical discussion as to why you don't agree, or move the debate forward. Or if you choose to accept it, that's fine as well. Some people will choose to accept just to get the publication out faster. But you've also got to be about integrity for yourself. If you don't agree with the comment, you have got to be able to stand your ground and say, you know what, I appreciate comments 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Comment 4, I disagree with. This is why. And you just have to come back, and that's academic debate. Just as, I never expect everybody to agree with what I do, what I say, what I write. I don't expect everybody to agree with my reviews either, because I'm not the one who's done the research. I'm just the one reading it. So you have that opportunity to come back. Respond carefully to the reviews. I think that's very important. Get input from other people along that process as well, because again, we become very close to what we write. And when somebody says, I disagree with this, it's hard for us to see whether their disagreement may align well with actually, yeah, they've got a good idea. So it's always good to get a couple of other people. I have a couple of students at the moment who every time they get something back, they look at it, they get sort of exhausted from looking at it. They send it to me, Craig, how do you view these comments? And I'll look at the comments, and quite often, this is a fair comment, but I might have to explain that comment in more detail. So having that extra person to help you think through the reviews and the comments you get can be very helpful. In terms of a step-by-step guide, you know, it, I think these are some of the practical advice, and let me just step through them quickly before I go into the external, and then we can open up for a Q&A. But the step-by-step guide, and not in any particular order, by the way, so don't think I have to do my tables and figures first, but do prepare tables and figures. Think about infographics as scaffolding. So I like to draw diagrams before I write words, because drawing a diagram helps me then write the text that goes with it. It's just a technique to help me focus and move forward. Think about the journal policies and instructions. Every journal is different. Can I have my table this way, or do I have to have it this way? Is there a certain number of columns I'm allowed? Is there all sorts of pedantic things? But at the end of the day, as author, it is your responsibility to adhere to those policies and to be able to meet the requirements of the journal. There's nothing worse than creating a fantastic piece of research, submitting it, and being told your diagrams do not conform, we cannot accept or publish. When actually, if you're just taking a bit more care, or sometimes get a graphic designer. It's becoming more and more popular. They are becoming cheaper and cheaper. But if you're not capable of spatially laying out a diagram or a table, or you find that challenging, pay someone to do it. There's nothing unethical, because it's still your work and you're briefing them what you want. They're simply arranging the space and the visuality of it in a better way. And I know for myself, I can do tables beautifully. I can manipulate any set of data in a table to be laid out lovely. I cannot do the same for diagrams. They end up by being a massive set of text, or a chunk of ideas over here, and then everything's scribbled in. I can give that to somebody else. I can explain it to them in 5 minutes. They come back and they have a fantastic diagram, which is journal ready to publish. So think about the layout, the size, the visual impact, understanding all of that. Write up the literature review if required. Now remember, the literature review we do for a PhD dissertation is somewhere between 10 to 40 pages. And I'm not, putting a quantum, don't say, oh, Craig said I have to write 40 pages, because, hopefully it's not that painful for us. But it's the literature review we're doing for a journal article is covering the key direction only. It's not covering the specifics. It's not comprehensive. It's simply looking at the major milestones that lead us to where we are. So our literature review shrinks down massively. So those 40 pages might become 1 page. So think about that. Keep that in mind. As you write, you're summarizing, you're synthesizing, you're analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, you're bringing all that together. And in 1 to 2 pages, which is, I think, a fair length in terms of a journal article for a literature review. In 1 to 2 pages, you're bringing the history of the last 10 years into a very short, not explaining everything you've read. You're just showcasing you've highlighted the most important. We write the method. It's a simple description of what you did. If it's a new method, if it's an established method, you're simply you're simply expressing, you're simply writing enough of it so that somebody else can repeat. And that's all that matters, replication. If I write my method out, you know what it is. And that's the last one, any statistical tests, any parameters, including any software. So if you've used SPSS 24 version 3, I can go on to the same, I can take your data set, I can get the same results. That's all I care about. You don't need to explain why you chose it. You don't need to explain every step in the process like I'm doing now. You simply need to, this was used, this was done, and move forward on that. You write up your results. What have you found? You're not about interpreting the results yet, okay? It's representative results that are essential for the discussion points. You don't want to include every single result you found because that's maybe 2 or 3 other papers, okay? But it also takes up valuable word limit. And if you've got between 5,000 to 8,000 words, your results section can swallow most of those, which means how can you actually make that contribution, make that impact that you have? So only use the results, representative results that have value to where your discussion is going. Logical order, so order of importance. Don't duplicate data amongst figures, tables, and text. So you put it in one format, you explain it in another, done. You don't need to have it in multiple forms. You write your discussion and the conclusion, so order of importance, comparing to other studies. So this is where literature review elements might come back into it. Inconclusive results should also be outlined. Limitations, which give us or other researchers the opportunities. And, how can your findings be applied in a more practical way or for future studies? Then you can look at writing the introduction. So although I said I write the title and the abstract first, I write my introduction last because I need to know what I'm introducing as a complete body in order to write about it. So I find it easier to deal with everything else and then come and say, okay, the introductory section, and set that off. An introduction and abstract is very different. An abstract gives us an overview. An introduction points us in the right direction and how we're getting there. So I personally find writing the introduction at the end a lot easier. Write the abstract and create a compelling title. Now, those are things I've done first. I should change this to say edit my abstract, because what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the whole body of work that I've written, and now I'm saying, does my abstract adequately reflect on what I've chosen to write? And finally, does my title now reflect that? Now, as a bit of a practical piece of advice, right? When I write a title, and I usually tell this to those who are writing their dissertations, but it works for journal articles and any publication as well. I always frame titles, whether it be the title of the full publication, whether it be title of a chapter or subheading, subchapter titles. I always frame titles as a question because my goal, my objective with my writing is to answer that question. Now, you can keep that for your audience. Maybe they appreciate that, but it's a technique for us. When we finish up, we can then say, well, does this title still have value or should I change it to something else? That's fine. But it's always a good way to help me because my goal with my writing is to answer anything that I've got. Now, a few peripheral questions, and I think I need 10 minutes to do this, so I apologize. I know I've gone over time. But a few peripheral things to consider that are really important because this is about making sure that what we do is ethical, what we do is transparent, but it's also understanding the process. As we publish, we have obligations and we have to learn through those and how to deal with them. So the first one is journal instructions for authors. Every journal on their website will have a set of instructions, house style or style guidelines. This is how they work. When you are writing your manuscript, you write to that style. You don't write it like you do and then decide, oops, I've got to change everything. Once you've identified your journal and you know this is where you're submitting to, then write in their style. It makes it so much easier as you progress. Think about or learn what their submission format is. So this will be right down to whether your name's on the manuscript, anything that can identify you, what format you're putting it in. Are you submitting it in Microsoft Word? Are you submitting it in LaTeX, which I don't know how to use? Again, there are pay someone to help you to get it in the format you need because at the end of the day, a little bit of help from outside can work. Special instructions, whether they have any special instructions, especially if it's a special edition, right? And editing and proofreading. I cannot emphasize this enough. It doesn't matter whether you're publishing in your first language, your second language, or your 10th. Do not submit something to a journal that has not been at least through some basic proofreading. I say this because your attention to detail in that shows your commitment to my journal. And if you submit something that's full of mistakes, I think you're treating me as a joke. Now, that sounds nasty, but at the end of the day, if you make the effort to try and clean it up as much as you can, at least when the journal gets it, they know that you're serious. It's like selling a second-hand car. If the car is dirty and full of rubbish, people are less interested and they'll beat you down on price. So if your manuscript is full of spelling mistakes and typos and things that you could correct yourself on Microsoft Word, I can't take you seriously. It will impact. And the first comment you'll get, if it's not rejected, your first comment will have this proofread. And then you'll feel bad about that. So always get it proofread first. I also believe at the first submission stage, working with an editor is not working with somebody who will edit your work. Proofreading and editing is different. Proofreading is about spelling and grammar. Editing is about structure. It's about flow. It's about the narrative. It's about the story that you tell. Actually, at the first submission stage, proofreading is important. The editing, the flow of that narrative, we can come back to that. You don't need to put the effort in straight away. You want to have it tidy and functional, but you might want to come back later once you've got comments and feedback. but you can never undo poorly proofread or bad spelling and bad grammar. That will just leave a horrible perspective. There are ethics, competing interests, and standards of reporting. So do allow me just a couple of minutes to talk about this. From an ethics side, I want to talk about the duplicate submission or publication. You cannot ethically submit the same publication, the same journal article, the same piece of research to two publications at the same time. You submit to one. If they go with the process, great. If they reject it, you submit elsewhere, but you change it. You learn from the feedback you get. A lot of PhD candidates think, let me write something and I'll submit it to 5 places. And the first one that says yes, I'll withdraw from everywhere else. Believe me, it gets noticed when you do things like that. So be strategic, be ethical. And at the end of the day, this is about you having that strategy for yourself. You know where your publications are going to be. It's not, I just hope it happens anywhere. It's actually, no, I want to be in the Journal of Development Economics. I then want to be in Journal of Developing Economies and, all of this, or emerging economies. So, have that, but make sure you don't submit the same article twice. Be very careful of plagiarism. As academics, we should not be plagiarizing. But plagiarism is cultural. It's not just an academic thing. It differs across cultures. And for many of us, our cultural norms tell us actually it's disrespectful to change somebody else's words and put into our own. Whereas academic culture tells us it's disrespectful to use somebody else's words exactly as ours. So it's very frustrating. But just be aware of that. Text recycling is a challenge that we all face. My master's supervisor is a very well-known author, very well-known academic actually, and he manages to produce somewhere between 15 to 20 articles a year for publication. You also have a lot of text recycling, and that's basically you can take a paragraph out of one and it will be in 3 others of his publications, because not that he's stealing it, it's his own work, but we have our own patterns. When I write things a certain way. Even if I take something and I move on to a different project, my thinking pattern is the same. I write things a certain way. So we have to be conscious about how we write and whether we are writing in a similar way to anything that we have previously published. And the next issue that comes with that is self-citation. Um, you know, some people self-cite because they want to improve their own rankings and their own metrics. And I can't say it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. But editors of journals do notice. And if, 20% of the citations or the references in your article are to the same person, even on a double blind peer review, if 20% of those citations are the same person, it's pretty solid you're the writer. So don't self-cite in order to inflate your own rankings. You've got to be very cautious about that. At the end of the day, if I write something, it's not the Dr. Craig show. It is about the research itself, not about the fact that I'm the only person who's done it. So do be aware of that, and do think, unless you are really the leader in that field, who else can you cite? Competing interests is about conflict of interest, disclosure, just being transparent about processes, and standards of reporting. And that's simply about the reproducibility of your research, but it's also about making sure that you are fully honest, you haven't omitted data, things like that. I don't ever like when I give a session like this having to talk about those issues, because as academics, we should know. But as academics, we're under pressure. The reality is sometimes things happen. So be aware, if you want to get published in quality journals, you've got to make sure everything is transparent, everything can be comfortably reproduced. Co-authorship is another issue, especially for PhD candidates. If we're a research student or a research candidate, there's often the expectation that our supervisor is a co-author by default. I don't want to get into this argument because globally it is very different. I come from an environment, I come from New Zealand. The New Zealand advisory is your supervisor will be a second author because their ideas help shape where you're going. Now, that's a PhD scenario. If I'm working with Dr. Haider here, for example, and we're doing something, that's not a PhD student relationship, it's different. But we would have a discussion at the beginning. Look, I'm going to do this amount of work. You're going to do this amount of work. Which one of us is going to have first authorship? And if you've got multiple authors, two authors is not a big deal. If you've got multiple authors, it's about knowing who led the most contribution through to the least. But it's also about the impact on the rankings and the citations, because how authorship works can also have an impact on there. So it's always important to have those discussions. Very briefly, the publishing contract, copyright. Every time you publish through a journal, you give up some of the rights to what you're doing. This, again, it changes depending on the journal, depending on their expectations. My advice here is, look, you will be given a contract to submit when they accept your article. Just make sure you understand what the limitations of that are, whether it impacts. If you're a PhD candidate and you haven't submitted your dissertation yet, take careful note, because in limited circumstances, publishing in a journal before you publish your PhD dissertation, there may be copyright issues. There may be diagram issues. So just make sure you understand that and you can work through it. Moving on, permissions. So this is when you're using other people's diagrams, making sure that's there. That's kind of common sense. Writing for SEO, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this may be my last slide. Here goes. When we write a journal article, we have to remember that these days journal articles are indexed electronically. So even though we may not be able to get the full article through our friend Dr. Google, we are able to find a lot about it. And usually the title, the abstract, maybe a few other pieces of it will be available. With that in mind, we want to use SEO, search engine optimization, as part of our writing technique for an article, because we want to make sure that when people search for the topic area, that you're going to come up in those Google searches, even if they can't find the full article, enough that they can track down where the article is going to be. So this is some very simple suggestions, okay? Create a search engine friendly title, so the keywords are in the title. The keywords need to be within the first 65 characters for visibility. Anything beyond that, 65 characters is only like 10 words. It's not a lot, but anything like that, be very, very cautious of. So when we think about constructing our title, it's not only, is the title attractive? Does the title address? Can I put in the first 65 characters, including the space, by the way, space is a character. Can I put enough keywords that it becomes searchable, that brings you to the early listings of what you've got? Optimize your abstract. So that's making sure that your essential findings, your keywords, are within the first two sentences. and that keywords are repeated 3 to 6 times within that abstract. That's for visibility, for searchability. And then you have your keywords throughout the article. So be very consistent with the terms that you use. Often we use 2 or 3 terms interchangeably. As somebody reading, I don't notice it because I know those 2 or 3 terms are logical and I know they overlap. But if you're looking for an algorithm, the singular keyword used all the time rather than 2 or 3 actually helps. You want to incorporate keywords into headings. That includes subheadings. So finding a way that every subheading within your article has that is very important. And you've still got to make sure it flows in a reasonable context. The sort of diagram there is a little bit small, but it's really just a few simple tips. What I do suggest, especially if you're not particularly experienced at writing for SEO purposes, go Google a little bit. SEO for academic writing. Watch a couple of short videos and get some examples and just apply it. And as you start developing your own writing style, this will come naturally. You know, 2 years ago, I hated looking at this and I forced myself to really think about it. Now it makes sense and it's part of the process. It's very easy, but it's something that we do have to be able to consider. My final point that I want to talk about is reviewer comments, because writing the manuscript is one thing. Responding to how others interpret our manuscript is actually the other half of the whole process, because it's very seldom you're going to get an acceptance that comes back with no changes. There will be somebody who wants you to address something. And it's very simple. React, reflect and consult. So do talk to others, revise, respond, explain your changes, and resubmit. Very easy. Keep it professional. One piece of advice. Never ever take reviewer comments or feedback personally. They have a job to do. They're giving you the perspective. You should be able to look at it objectively and say, you know what, maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but never take it personally, because it's not a personal attack on you. It's simply a reviewer is saying, I think you can change your manuscript to be stronger. And I would argue, anytime somebody's helping me to do something better, that's to my advantage. So I should appreciate that from the experience from the reviewer. Now, I've come back to proofreading and editing, and quite often the comment is please have a native English speaker proofread or edit. I really hate that choice of words, because I know people who are not native English speakers who are much more eloquent and accurate with their writing than I am. At the end of the day, though, it's simply saying, look, this needs tidying up. So if you engage with a proofreader and editor, it's not about who you engage with. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of them, us out there. I do proofreading and editing. At the end of the day, it's not who you engage with, it's how you engage with them. Don't ever send somebody your article and just expect them to change it. Always find someone that you can do a Zoom call with, that you can explain your research, that they can ask you questions. I will always work with somebody in real time. It might take a couple of hours. I'll read it first, but then I'll have questions. I'll come back, I'll put it on the screen, and I'll say, tell me what you meant by this. Because when you explain what you meant, I can see how I want to change it. But more importantly, I can explain to you why I made a change, so that next time you can use those patterns rather than your existing patterns. So engage with somebody who's going to invest that little bit of time, because that will develop your skill. it will help you understand. So I hope, as I come to the end, I hope that uh, I've sort of given some ideas that will help you to be able to write, that will be able to get published faster where possible. I mean, it's a long race because we can be anything from a week to I've seen articles that took over 10 years to go through the review process, which is pretty scary. But I hope I've given some practical advice and ideas on how to develop and how to progress with your writing. So I'll hand back to you, sir, for any questions that have come through.
Yes, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. Superb. The way you just started the presentation was so great, and I love the way you started it, choosing what to publish. That's the most important question. Whether it is from PhD work or you are doing the collaboration, what is there and what you are trying to do, and then how you are going to choose the journal, alignment with the journal, their objectives, and what a nice content you have given in each every slide. I love that way. You talked about the canvas, you talked about the wonderful explanation regarding the reviewer, the ethical consideration. I mean, there is nothing left which you just did not discuss and have not shared your thoughts on that. And I love the way you answer each and everything because you have answered 80% questions in your wonderful presentation.
Much
Which is,
like a good Viva should be for a PhD. Answer the
yeah.
questions before they can be asked.
Wonderful, Prof. And I love the way you talked about the role of the editing and proofread. And very nicely, you have given your own example that when you receive any kind of request for the proofread or edit, you even arrange the Zoom meeting with them. So, in order to get the understanding that what the writer or the author wants to convey and where the meaning should be conveyed accordingly. And then, what a nice lesson you have given that next time the author will remove their existing pattern and adopt a new pattern which you would have told them to adopt. I think that's the improvement, that's the growth the author needs. And this is how we polish our academic writing skills. Very nice and very practical steps you have mentioned. I love your 12 tips, which are very great. I wish I could have the opportunity to have gone through these kind of webinar when I was doing my PhD from University of Malaya. Really, that would have been a much help for me at that time because we learn in a very difficult, in a very hard way. But you made it very easy and simple for our audience to learn it. And the very famous business philosopher Jim Rohn usually says it's simple, but it requires hard work to do it. The process is simple, but we need to understand that it will learn through the practice. So I really enjoyed this session. I really enjoyed each and every slide. And I was thinking that you are so great in 1.5 hour session. How great you would be when you are in the class for 3 credit hours, or when we will be having meeting with you for a whole day, how beneficiary that meeting would be because we have a wonderful experience and exposure. Thank you very much, Prof, for such a wonderful presentation and content. But a lot of questions also waiting in the queue for just to have your illustration because a lot of people they have shown interest and they need clarification from your side. So should we start with the first question, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the first question they want to ask that thank you very much, Prof, for your wonderful presentation. I learned a lot from you. I'm the beginner researcher. Please help me and please let me know that what are the key factors that editors and reviewers look when evaluating the potential impact of the research study. Since you are the reviewer by yourself, so how do you measure the impact of a research study? Yes, please.
I think what I look for from anything that is submitted is I look for something that's interesting, that's unique, that's novel. The impact is not so much about how big that element of being novel will be, but it is about the fact that you are showcasing something that others have not done. So really, what I'm looking for is you don't recycle the work that someone else has done. You're making a new contribution where you possibly can. That's the key part that I look for. I'm going to say for a beginning academic, because you mentioned, as somebody who's at the start of your journey, it's really hard to find that big wow factor out of everything we do, because we're just doing those tiny little incrementals. But if we can find something that is a new perspective or a differing perspective on what we've got, we're making that impact. So impact's not about big, impact's about helping to move it forward a little bit. Don't have expectations that, we're reinventing something, we've found a new planet. None of us will have that impact. None of us for many, many years will win a Nobel Prize. But I do hope that towards the end of your career, you are in the running for that. But at the early stages, simply make sure you're not repeating somebody else's work.
Wow, Prof, wonderful answer to this question. Thank you very much. And now another question is from the early researcher and the first year of PhD student. They want to ask that, Prof, thank you for your great presentation. Please guide me that I'm writing email to experienced researcher for collaboration to mentor me to improve my publication chances, but nobody's replying me back. So please give me the tips that how can I convince the established researchers to collaborate with me and work with me for publication. Yes, please.
I I fully understand that situation, and I have a lot of research candidates say, look, I've written to these people, nobody responds to me. It's a very unfortunate situation that many people face these days. I was lucky. I was sharing with Dr. Haider before we started the recording. I came from both a generation uh, of this, but I was able to reach out to people, and I got great responses. But that was early days of the internet, and things were easier back then. Today, academics are busier. And I'm not defending them, because I always try to write back to people. But academics are busier. It's easy to get lost in the process. And you do have to build up a rapport. So I'm a very strong advocate for LinkedIn as an academic connection tool. Follow people. Don't connect with somebody and have that first email that says, hi, I'm doing this, I want your help, because that isn't always viewed. Research carefully. A few pieces of advice. If you're using LinkedIn, follow, comment on what they share, build up that uh, rapport with the individual, so that you can, a few weeks later, send them an email, send them a message. But I think the best thing to do is look, cold calling somebody can be very difficult. I hate it. I do it, but I hate it still. I always look for somebody that knows that individual. And I get a lot of personal introductions. And the same, PhD candidates come to me, come through other academics or other candidates that I know who have given an introduction. So look for that. But if you have to cold call, introduce yourself, introduce your research, request whether there's a possible way they can help you, and follow up. Don't follow up by sending the same email a second time. That's horrible. But follow up through the university. Maybe if you can write to the department secretary, look, just wanting to check, is Dr. SELBY on campus this semester? I sent him an email, haven't got, could you help me check if he could get it? And there are subtle, softer ways to be able to get that connection. Um, Back when I did my master's degree, it was early years of internet for universities, okay? But one of the great things, one of the great experiences I had is because I had a university email account, um, I could email off, and I emailed two individuals. One was Professor Rolf Kramer, who is a specialist in Southeast Asia, and the other was Professor Janet Lander from the States, who has been around for decades and decades and decades. And I honestly had zero expectations. A week later, at my university office, arrived a package of books from Rolf with a little handwritten note. Got your email, thought you'd like my books. And he sent me. He became my PhD supervisor, by the way, later on. Janet, who was a anthropologist, I think, from memory, had several of her articles scanned, sent to me as an attachment. Now, I was very lucky because the first people I approached were very good at responding and being helpful. And that's the type of people we hope for. And that's why if somebody emails me, I'll do my best to reciprocate. But you do have to approach in a very friendly way. And you do have to follow up, not with them, but around and see how you can do it. I do wish you good luck with that. I know how hard it can be, but always look for anybody that can help you to be introduced as well, including your supervisor.
Wow, wonderful answer to this question, Prof. Thank you very much. Really interesting tips you have shared, that even don't send the second email the same kind of, because it will just get annoyed the professor regarding that thing. And getting help from your supervisor, even from the university secretary, just to let them know that if, for example, Prof. Selby is around, you have given your own wonderful example. I think these are the genuine tips which the people are looking forward, and they learn from it. And this is what we want to educate the people regarding, that how can they approach the different professors, different established researchers, what are the norms and what are the values they should follow and respect. And this is, you have shown a wonderful gentle ways to approach to the professors. Thank you very much, Prof. And there is one another question from the early researcher. I love the way they are showing interest in it. Prof, there is a question that thank you for your great presentation, Prof. I'm the first year PhD student, and I targeted the high impact journals, and I got the desk rejections a lot. And now, Prof, I'm in a big trouble. So please, are there any alternative avenues or the journals that early researchers can explore to gain valuable publishing experience before targeting the high impact factor journals? Yes, please.
I think the question answers itself in the nicest way. Let's start by saying even the most experienced academics get desk rejections. And it comes down to what was my early slide when I say select the journal. You need to find that synergy. This is not about paper and journal hitting each other. This is about a beautiful synergy between the two, that you are meeting the journal's objectives and where it is heading. And if you miss that, if you get that wrong, desk rejections are easy. If you get it right, it should go out to a reviewer, assuming they find a reviewer. Okay. Um, but you answered your own question, I think, beautifully. Look, we're chasing metrics, we're chasing impact factor. I get that. But as an early career academic, as our first couple of publications, we shouldn't be aiming for the best. That's our career goal. We want to get there. But we need to get the experience. We need to go through, the heartbreak, so to speak. But we need to be able to start. And this is why I advocate, look, publish where it's realistic for you at this moment. Um, Unless what you're doing is so incredibly groundbreaking that that Nobel Prize is within the next 10 years, don't set your sights for the best journal. set your sights at the mid-range and go with them first. Your first couple of publications, it's like a driving test. You know, you learn to drive the car, you sort of get out there, you're nervous as you're shaking, but you get the driver's license. You're getting the driver's license. Your third, your fourth, your fifth publication, they get better. The rule of the game, as I see it, is look, don't start too high because it is going to be hard. It's an uphill battle. Start mid to low, but every time raise that bar bit by bit and showcase your own development, because at the end of the day, what you do for your PhD, you know, I apologize in advance because this is going to sound horrible, but what we do for our PhD is inconsequential. In the bigger picture of things, it's just the first step in the door. It's what we do as we continue. So don't let it define you. Don't let it force you to get into the best journals possible. Let it be the opening of that door into the publication journey and go for something that's a bit lower. Get it there and then start or learn from that experience and develop your skills more and more as you progress with that.
Wow, Prof. Thank you very much. And now we can summarize in a way that slowly and steady wins the race. Very nicely, you have talked that start from the lower point and then you just go higher in that ladder, because this is the rule of the game. Since you are a wonderful expert of this area, so that's why everything starts from the scratch. We learn from the zero expectation, and then slowly and gradually we learn this art of publication, because from our own errors and by the reviewers recommendation we learn that what are the shortcomings and how can we improve it further. So thank you very much. And now we got the question from one of the lecturer, and they say that thank you, Prof, for your wonderful presentation. I recently completed my PhD, and now I got inducted as a lecturer. And there is a high expectation from me to publish in high impact journal because of my new career. So, Prof, please guide me, because I have a lot of rejection from the good journals, and now there's a psychological pressure on me that apart from my PhD work, I'm choosing the other areas and I'm not good at that areas. So should I be publishing again from my PhD area, or do you recommend me to choose the new trends and ideas? So I'm puzzled. Please solve my puzzle. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations on getting a lectureship because, there's a lot of people out there competing, so that's a good first step. Your question, I've got two answers for specifically. I'm not sure if my two answers are going to agree with each other. So as you sort of think through what I'm saying, think about how it's going to work for you. Uh, I believe that when we've done our PhD, it becomes something that goes onto the shelf. I feel that if you try to breathe new life into the dissertation, if it's more than 1 or 2 years ago, you're really trying to resurrect a dead animal, and it's not going to work. You can't put an animal in the freezer and come back 6 weeks later and try to give it CPR. It's not going to happen. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, but what I'm saying is, look, research is about currency, about being contemporary, about being today. And if you're already finding the pressure from it, move on. This is where my second part of the answer comes in. You need to develop a career strategy. This is not just, I'm getting my lectureship, I'm doing my teaching, I'm going to publish. Actually, what is the next 5 years for you? What are your publications going to be? How is your research interests evolving, changing, growing? Are they going in a straight line? Are they diverging? Are they diverging this way into many different themes? What are the commonalities? And I would say, look, you can still get one or two publications out of your PhD, even though it's now in the past. Do that, but spend more time on developing the next steps than looking back to the past. My research has evolved over the years. What I publish, what I do, has changed a lot, and the PhD was a key to the door. I have a PhD in economics. Um, I feel very sad about that because I teach educational leadership. The world changed. I changed. I grew. And I have not done research on anything related to my PhD for close to 2 decades. So it's been a while. So, in respect of that, look forward, not look backwards. Get a publication if you can. The psychological pressure is always going to be there. Um, I think at the end of the day, though, if you keep trying to give that dead animal CPR, you're going to get the same results. So why not focus on what the new opportunities are going to be and really put that effort? But as I say, this is about developing a career strategy, career planning, as much as it is about the publication. So you have to be able to sit down and think, look, what what themes am I interested in? What evolution of that? Where do I see this heading? And map that out in terms of what you can do. And then it has to come back to the last part I want to make, which is also the very first comment I made in my presentation relating to choosing the journals. If you're getting a lot of desk rejects, I'm thinking you haven't given enough consideration to the journals to make sure they align with your needs. And maybe you have to consider coming down a level or two first in terms of the journal you want, or you have to go further afield and try to find out what other journals there are. Maybe you need to look at interdisciplinary journals. All of this is possible. But I think that there's a bit of a mismatch between what you've written and what the journals are looking for if you're getting desk rejects as a more common experience than you are actually getting a review. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Prof. Really, I'm enjoying the way you are giving answer, full of practical experiences, and what a wonderful recommendations you are giving. It's so nice, so great, Prof. Thank you. And now there is one another question from the senior lecturer, and he wants to ask that, Prof, I need your guidance. I want to increase my visibility and citation since my business school is more concerned regarding not only the publication but the citations as well. So please guide me. Is it ethical that I share my full text on different platforms on social media because some of my articles are not in open access? So I need your directions that can I share my full text on different platform? Uh, well, the journals will not sue me in that respect. Please,
You've hit a
yeah, thank you.
very tough question there. There are provisions within copyright laws for us to share printed copies of our articles with our students, with our libraries, but there are also limitations with our publishing contract with each of the journals. It's in everybody's. I'm going to answer this not from a legal perspective, but from a personal perspective. I believe it's in everybody's interest to be able to share. I am a strong advocate that as academics, we should be active on social media and sharing the research that we do, whether it be open access or not. I do believe that we can be creative with how we draw attention to the publications that we make. I can't give you an answer as to whether or not you can take the full text of something you write because my honest perspective is you wrote it, it's yours, but publishing houses tell us differently, so we work in a very challenging environment. Um, but I think there are ways to make sure that you're increasing your visibility and getting that out there, and LinkedIn being one of the options. Having a blog that links us to the DOI of the articles that we've done, even if it's behind a paywall, because you know what? Just because I can't get free access to your publication through your site doesn't mean I'm going to not go somewhere else and find it. So if I have your name and I have your title of your article and I have the abstract and I know that that's interesting enough, believe me, nothing will stop me from getting that article. Not a publisher's paywall, nothing. So trying to drive the visibility is not necessarily about the full text of the article being out there, but it's about knowing that the article exists, perhaps your own commentary on your own work. Now, one of the things I like with LinkedIn is if you share something, write a one paragraph summary, not an abstract, that's a whole different game. Write a one paragraph summary of who will benefit from this, what it can be used for, what was your one key finding, etc. Because again, it's visibility that you get. Now, just sort of to emphasize this, let me tell you a little story. So I had a webinar similar to this a few weeks ago with my friend Mike Mustafa from Nottingham. And prior to the webinar, he and I were talking about visibility, and he was talking about another academic from Malaysia, and he couldn't remember the guy's name. And he's like, "Oh, he's always doing this, this, this," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's this guy. I won't say his name because I don't want him. I think he's a good guy. I think his research is great, but it's also in a negative context that I'm using the example." I told him his name. Oh yeah, that's the guy. And I don't know this guy. I've never met him, but I do see that every couple of weeks he's either putting up the full text or a key diagram. And that's something you can take 10% of anything somebody else has copyright for, and you can still share it publicly under global copyright laws. So he takes key diagrams and he talks about the research, and he links you to where you can get it. If the publishing house allows unlimited access or even allows 50 free downloadable copies, he puts it up there and he makes sure it's disseminated. So it does help his visibility, because what I realized is Mike and this guy are not in the same discipline arena. There's some parallels, but they're enough of a distance apart. But the visibility is there. So be creative. Um, I think, to be fair, if you were to break the law by publishing again a PDF of one of your articles, I don't imagine a publishing house will be all that bothered, because I still believe that at the end of the day, that increases their visibility as well. Now, that's not legal advice, that's personal, but be creative, be strategic with it. And if there's something that you've published in a journal and you really want to get it out there, talk with the journal editor and see what leeway they can give you.
Wow, Prof, thank you very much. And I love the way you just answered that it's my personal opinion, not the legal expert opinion on that. And very nice practical strategic tips you have given, that how can they do it. And very nicely you have quoted the LinkedIn, that we can just use this LinkedIn even by giving the summary of our work, that would increase our visibility as well. And since very nicely you have mentioned that somebody just write our name, etc. details, they can find our details very easily on the websites. Thank you very much, Prof. And now one another interesting question. I'm sure you will also love this question. The question is that, Prof, please guide us regarding the role of the cover letter. We write the cover letter to the editor. How significant, and do the different editors read the cover letter? Please share your experiences with us.
I, I think back to conversations I've had with editors who's like, I'm just going to read the article. So a lot of a lot of journal submissions are online via very impersonal websites where we don't really have a lot of opportunity. I think the cover letter is simply an opportunity to show your differentiation of your research. What is new, what is novel, what is impactful, what is innovative. Um, at the end of the day, there's something that I think needs to go into a cover letter that I think is a tip. I'm not going to talk about how to write the cover letter. We can Google that, but it should be about where the research is. What contribution your research makes. But I think a valuable addition to the cover letter is to suggest potential reviewers for the manuscript. And I put this in there because editors that I know sometimes struggle to get reviewers. And your field, your niche better than anybody else. And if you can suggest 4 to 5 potential reviewers, that would make the editor's job easier. Now, important here is this should not be your PhD supervisor. This should not be your collaborating authors. Be ethical about it, but at the same time, helping the editor to have a direction. So one of the big problems editors face is, look, they get a great um, article submission come in, and they see it and they say, you know what, this is good. And then they think, who can I ask to review this? I have no idea. They have a very limited pool of reviewers. So if you can help that process, do that right at the beginning with your cover letter. But it's not like you should use the following people as reviewers. It's like if your pool of reviewers is limited, the following people have an interest that aligns with this publication, and just help them out. So that's my best advice on that. Um, I think the focal point of the cover letter, if you are producing one, because not always you will, but if you are producing one, is showcasing what is unique about the research and how that aligns with journal objectives. Make it a very easy read for the editor. Make them be able to say, you know what, this is worth sending out to a reviewer. To answer the second part of that question, the reviewers that I know, the editors that I know, they don't always read everything. So it's very much like when we want to email off to a famous professor in the hope that we can engage with them. Some of them will read, some of them won't. Um, it's just bad luck some days. So they're not always going to be read.
Wow, Prof, thank you very much. And these are the practical suggestions to them. And very nicely, you have talked that what they are supposed to write in that one, not the each and every minute details, but what things they need to include in their cover letter because it has also a kind of significance. And it depends on their luck whether the editor reads it or not. Very nicely, you have said that it can be their luck. Uh, and now, Prof, another very interesting question. I am sure you are going to enjoy this session, this question as well. The question is they want to ask that, Prof, please guide us. Does the corresponding author profile matters or not? Yes, please. Because there are established researchers, and if they send a paper, there is a probability that the paper is going to be accepted. Yes, please.
So very challenging to answer this because the old school me says actually it matters. But under a double blind peer review process, nobody knows. So that's where self citation might give an indication. I think there is a correlation between first and second authorship and what that does, because when you become et al, you don't become anybody in a citation, which is a problem. I feel though if you are approaching the journal directly, not through an automated submission where your name doesn't come into it. If you're approaching the journal directly, a known individual, a known name will actually help get a more positive response. I think that's basic human psychology. Um, if in doubt, always go with anything that will help you advance the process. But do not do not ever give up first authorship for the convenience of trying to get the publication. At the end of the day, you still want to retain first authorship if you've done the bulk of the work, out of respect for your contribution to that knowledge. I think that's the best way I can answer that, because there is no answer. But I think that that gives the most fair advice at that stage.
Thank you very much, Prof. I really love the way you answer each and every questions. And since we have taken a lot of your wonderful and precious time, one last question I would like to ask because the audience they want to know about you. That Prof, would you like to share with us what is your source of motivation doing so wonderful work? What keeps you motivated? Yes, please.
So at heart, I've been, I started my teaching career when I was very young. I started as a university student when I was 17. I got my first teaching job when I was 18, and I haven't stopped since. My motivation is, I think, at the heart of everything, I am a teacher. I like research, it's fun, but I like teaching more. And combining the two is always an extreme value. When I teach, I learn from others. Um, it's much like being a child for your whole life because children just learn and absorb everything that's around them. And I think we can as adults too. My motivation is also about creating a better world. I can't have an impact that's going to make the world better directly. But if I help other people who can do that as well, I have by default done that. And I think it's important. We have to be able to help others. We have to be able to create environments where people can grow, people can develop their skills. And for me, my interest is in research. And if I can help researchers become better, that's my motivation for doing what I do. Um, Money is not the motivation because academics mostly don't make money. So if you're early stage and you're thinking you're going to make millions, chances are you won't,
Yeah.
especially from textbook publishing, but they're still good to do.
Yes, Prof. Wonderful, Prof. Thank you very much. Thoroughly, I enjoyed this wonderful session with you. What a powerful content and the great slides you have shared with us. Really great content, and I enjoyed this whole because it was a blend of the experiences, practical suggestions, exposures, everything counted in that, and it was a great session. Prof, at the end of the session, we ask our each guest regarding their message to the world. So, Prof, what is your message to the world as a speaker, author, teacher, researcher, a learner, professional, and educator? Yes, please.
I'll keep it very simple. Never give up on what you're trying to do. Uh, in research, results may not come back what we think. That doesn't make it a failure. Even failed research we can write about. So never give up, never let the hassles overwhelm us. Just simply keep going at it and recognize that today you're receiving help, tomorrow you will be giving help to someone else. Embrace that and go with it. And that's it.
Wow, wonderful. What a powerful message you have given to the world that get the help and even then you extend the helping hand to the others. And this is what we are doing. We are trying our best to share the knowledge because we believe in a philosophy that knowledge grows when shared. So, very nice phrase you have given, never give up. And if you allow me, I would quote the Jim Rohn, who usually give the philosophy of ant, which says that if you block the way for it, if it will go left, right, above, and beyond, but they will never quit. So I think the ant philosophy is the same, that you keep doing it, and one day will come that you will become the expert of it. And very nicely he has mentioned that everyone is the beginner, and then later on they get the expertise in while doing it. So the same message given by you, since you are a wonderful expert in the field, and you have given the same kind of message that never give up, keep doing it, and the day would come that they will be doing it in a very nice way and will be contributing back to the society, field, and world. So thank you once again, Prof, and to the audience that please do follow our distinguished guest speaker through his research work, and you can email him for future learning and guidance. He is very generous and always ready to help the people. Moreover, wonderful explanation and powerful content which the Prof has already elaborated will help you to learn and develop your understanding regarding how to publish in high impact journals. So that's all we have time for today, and thank you once again to Professor Dr. Craig Selby for your precious time, for your wonderful guidance. And I would like to thank the audience who joined us. If you have any additional questions about information shared today, please email us or connect to the speaker directly through his email, maybe the LinkedIn or other social media account. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. Until next session, take care of yourself.